Welcome to Anneliese's Mixed Media Series for Beginners. Come on in, sit down, relax, and enjoy this series. And thanks for watching. Hi everyone, welcome back to Anneliese's Mixed Media Art Journaling class for beginners. And remember last week we did our cover, and I hope that you will do your cover and that you'll share it in the Facebook group. I would love to see what you're doing, so don't hesitate. Even if you're a beginner, please share, because we would love to see what you're doing. And not only that, it's a safe place to get constructive criticism or ideas of how to improve, that kind of thing. And if you're shy about it, message me on Facebook. I can help you out there. Anyhow, we're going to talk a little bit more about art journaling and what it is. Okay, so art journaling is basically a visual way of expressing yourself. And maybe adding words or writing or whatever, getting your feelings down and then illustrating those feelings. It could be, art journaling can take you in many different directions. It could be, a practice journal where you're just practicing different techniques, different styles, that kind of thing. It could be one word inspiration. For instance, say that week it's star, okay? So create a page based on that word, all right? Or it could be a quote or a saying or something along those lines that will inspire you, spark that idea to get you started, all right? So that's basically what art journaling is. And it's a mixed media. Art journaling is basically using different types of medium, okay, but different types of art supplies and using it in your art journal. And there's no tried and true rules as to how to put together your art journal, how it should look, that kind of thing. That is all a personal taste, in my opinion. It's just like if you open, some people can be wine connoisseurs. I'm going to say connoisseur, okay, versus someone who just likes to drink wine but isn't, doesn't really want to delve into the fancy stuff. And it doesn't necessarily mean that an expensive bottle of wine is going to taste good. It's all a matter of taste, right? So, having said that, this week we're going to go to the inner page. We're going to skip this page because this will be eventually maybe an index page. You might want to remember what we did, and then, and also as we go along, don't forget in the Facebook group, in the files section, will be where I post all the extra things, like the art supplies I like to get, where I get them from, that kind of thing, as well as maybe tips and tricks, extra little bits of things that you might find that I might have added in this, to go ahead and find that, as well as what we did that week. So in the end, we'll create our index, all right? So for the first layout, we're going to do a double page spread because I counted these out, and we can pretty much do double pages, all right? So this week, I want you to do something fun, okay? I want you to get some magazines. Most of us might still read magazines, and if you don't, go to your local library, because a lot of times they will give away their magazines for free when they're done with them. So go and find, if you don't subscribe to any magazines or newspapers or anything like that, you can also go online and look for words, all right? Look for just random words that interest you, like happiness, summer, think of different types of words that will, jump out at you, and cut out those words. Then I want you to mix them all up and then grab one. Okay, grab whatever phrase or word you've picked out. So I'm going to show you how I organize my words. I have this fancy schmancy case here, and in it I have these little drawers, and they all have different, you know, A through I, J through R, S through Z. So I still go and I subscribe to some magazines because I like to use certain magazines for collage work as well as for cutting out words, phrases, that kind of thing. And also I'll go to like Barnes & Noble occasionally and pick up an art magazine there. And then eventually when I'm done with it, I will cut it up and use it for collage as well as the words in them. So I'm going to mix these up. I'm going to pick out a word. Something that's going to, oh, I actually got summer. Okay. And take that. So the next step is to think about, sorry, hang on a second, to think about what do this word, summer, what comes to mind when you think of summer? All right? So we're not going to glue the word on just yet, all right? So for me, summer kind of brings to mind lots of blues and teals and beiges because of the sand, the hot sand and that kind of thing. So first off, I'm going to start out with some different colors and things in our background. We're going to start out with a layer of paper first to kind of build up our page and add some texture and interest. So gather your pieces of paper, okay, any kind of scraps that you might have laying around, and I will show you my scrap box. It's big. It's a huge, like, you know, where your office paper comes in, like if you order a case of it, it comes in a box like this. So when I work with pages and things, they all end up in here. Any bits and scraps end up in this box. So I'm just going to start just grabbing it, pulling out some papers, and this was an old calendar here from, I don't even know where I got the calendar from. I think somebody sent this calendar to me in Happy Mail. So this is also a great way of creating a collage type page. I have some jelly printed papers here that I have. And I know I said we weren't going to use jelly printed papers in this, but if you happen to have any, you know, grab them. But I'm not going to be using them in my group here, in this one. I even have some palette paper that I used as for you know, some acrylic paint that was left over. So I'm just going to grab some pieces here. I've got some old dictionary pages, pieces of that. We used a lot of security envelopes last week, so I'm not going to use any security envelopes this week. This was from a page that I had created a background for, and then what I did was I scanned it onto my computer and I printed it out. And then I used some of it in another project. See how it's all torn up? So I'm just going to pull out a few things here and there and see what I come up with for my background. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of building up the background. And I'm just pulling out some random pieces of paper here because I kind of like to do that and create kind of a collage type background. And then I go from there. And And what else does summer bring to mind? Travel. You know, think of maybe doing a piece where you're going to travel somewhere. Like if you've come back from vacation or you're going on vacation, maybe collect a few of those things that places that you've been, even pieces of the menu, a napkin, what else? Tickets, if you've gone someplace to like an art museum or you went to a musical or something like that, think about that. And perhaps you might want to try to, even postcards. That's a great thing to add to your background or to your foreground, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to start tearing this up. This was from a magazine and it was already done, but I kind of like to keep some of these pieces like that and I add them to my background. So I'm just going to start ripping papers. I'm going to fast forward through this part because this is kind of boring watching me rip papers and glue them down. So I'm going to quickly fast forward through this part and then I will be back, and I'm using my Deco Art matte medium for this part. So I suggest you get some water. I'm going to use a paintbrush to glue these down, so any paintbrush will do. You know, usually people recommend that you use one specific brush for glue, all right? Because it can kind of ruin the bristles of a brush. But for me, this is a craft brush, and to me, art journaling is nothing really important to where I need expensive brushes. So I use any old brush for my glue brush, and that's just me. It's just a matter of preference. And if you've got that gift card, make sure you have that handy, because that will help flatten it down a little bit as we glue these down. And my pages are wrinkled. That's normal in a composition book. They're not going to lay completely flat, and that adds some of the texture to your journal, and I just love it. I think it's great to have that texture look. I even have a bit of writing here that I used for another project, and it's going on. Alright, so all my extra pieces go back into that big box. And then I might come back and add more later after I add my layers. Alright, so this was one thing I forgot to mention in my supply list, as well as last week. I believe I didn't mention it, but I have a heat gun. This is a Tim Holtz, I believe it's a Dilutions heat gun. I can't even read the sides anymore. It's very well loved. It's full of paint because of all the times I've worked and then have paint on my hands and I go to grab it. So it is very well loved, as you can see. So if you don't have a heat gun and you have a blow dryer in your house, use your blow dryer. It will work. To quickly dry your layers. It's, if you have time, just leave your journal. If you don't have a hair dryer or a dryer, just leave it out in the open and let it dry on its own, and then come back and finish the lesson. That's another way of doing it. Or if it's a really hot day, put it outside for a few minutes and it will dry completely. It's like it's almost already dry, because unfortunately you're probably hearing a little bit of noise in here because I have my ceiling fan on today because it is a hot day. So I have it going, and with it going, it's almost completely dry. But I'm going to go ahead and just run it a little bit more. Okay. Now I'm going to take some gesso, because I'm going to push some of this back to the background. And this is the gesso I mentioned to you last week, but it's in a smaller, more manageable bottle. I buy travel bottles, the squeeze travel bottles, and use that for gesso and other things for when I travel. This is actually part of my travel kit that I use for when I am on the road and I want to still art and I want to bring my gesso. I bring a little bit of it. So now I'm going to get a clean, or fairly clean, gift card. And I'm going to scrape, because I do like to scrape. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to scrape paint onto my background. And if you're not liking, if you want certain parts to show more through, you can use a lot less gesso, and you could actually use a baby wipe to wipe off some of the background to have it show back through. Okay, get out your fancy schmancy paper plate. And if you have some blue acrylic paints in various shades, get those out. And this was another thing I forgot to mention, was I do like to use makeup sponges. So I know that you can get them like at, Target sells them, any of your makeup places sell them, and you can quite frequently get them on sale or get them with a coupon. And I do like to use these for when I'm using stencils, and I'm going to be using a few stencils in like circle-like patterns. So if you have any circle-like pattern stencils, use those. If you don't, that's okay. Figure out how you want your background to look. Okay, so I've got different stencils and different circle styles here. Okay. Because remember, this is your art journal page. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, because I'm hoping that this whole adventure will teach you to think outside of the box, think about what you can use to make marks. If you don't have stencils, use circle-like cylinders, things that are circles, and I'll show you in a little while, because I'm going to come back with some other circle mark making tools that I showed you last week, as well as this week. I'm going to be using this kind of almost the same thing, but in a different kind of thing. So anyways, I'm going to get my paints and I will be right back. So I just picked out some different blues, okay, and teals kind of colors. The Deco Art Traditions is what I'm using, and I'm also using a Deco Art Vintage Effect wash. It's pretty much just like a, almost like a milk paint kind of thing, and this is more for like home decor type stuff, but I still use it in my art journals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, I think, the darker of them all. Let's see, I think this one's kind of darker. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to squeeze a small amount onto my palette. And this is where it gets a little tricky. So you don't want a whole lot of paint on your sponge. So you kind of want to dab it a few times first before you come in and start using your stencil. Because you don't need that much paint when you're working with a stencil, or it won't mark as well. It won't leave an imprint as well on your page. And you can still use that same sponge because it really, you know, it might pick up some of the blue, but it'll look pretty good. So there's a little excess on the lid, so that's what I'm going to use this next stencil with. This is really Punchinella, it's what it's called. And someone had sent me this in some Happy Mail, and quite honestly, I don't know where to purchase it. So you might be able to find it online somewhere. If you just put in the word Punchinella, it may come up. And I'm still using the same sponge because what I like is sometimes the colors kind of mix with each other and creates kind of a better, you know, colored background, except I used a little too much. So this is what's going to happen if you use a little too much paint, it kind of blobs. So you don't need to add too much paint to the makeup sponge. Dab it a little bit more to kind of get off the excess onto your palette and then use it. I often forget to do that, and then that's what I end up with. Now I'm getting my teal, more teal-like color. using the same sponge, but this time make sure you kind of tap off some of the excess a few times. And what I like to do sometimes is come back in and go back over another stencil with this. Kind of layer your stencils. Alright, so I have a lot of tape dispenser, washi tape leftovers from washi tapes, different circles, cylinders, as well as this one. And I've got some bubble wrap. Actually, this was really from a solar cover. And then I've got this spinny thingy, okay? So I'll show you how to use these in just a minute. Alright, so I'm using a little bit darker color of blue. And I'm going to put some on here. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it through my paint. Make sure that I have enough coverage on it, all of it. Okay. Kind of reminds me of waves, this one does, and it doesn't really show up on the camera very well, but it's there. Alright, so I'm going to take some kind of a beigey kind of color, tan colored type paint, if I have any. I think I do. I don't have much left of this one, but it's warm white. And with my different cylinders, I'm going to go ahead and put them in, and then what I kind of do is I kind of stamp at least a couple times to make sure that I've got it enough on there, and then I'm going to come in and just add some marks. Okay, so then I already used that white, so I'm going to go ahead and dry it off first, and then I'm going to pick another color. Okay, so I'm going to use some black now, black acrylic paint. And I'm going to use a bigger one. And I've mixed it with my white, so it's going to be more like gray. Okay, it didn't really work out very well, so let me try this again. There we go. That's better. Alright, so here's my tape dispenser. And I'm going to use what's left over on the paint here. And it's kind of mixed together. And I don't mind that because it's going to look kind of cool when I'm done here. So it's going to look like that. Okay, and you're going to come in and mark your page. Alright, so this is where some of my favorite things I like to use is, I like old vintage postage stamps, because I've decided that I like this spread, and that summer not only reminds me of the beach, so I've used these blues and teal kind of colors in my background, but summer also reminds me of traveling, and so why not put down some of your you know, different types of stamps in your on your page, okay, from different types of countries, maybe countries that you've visited or you want to visit. If you don't have old vintage vintage stamps, and you have some postcards, use a postcard in this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pick out a few of these, and then I'm going to go ahead and put these down on my page. And then I think I will then add my word or words. We'll see how this goes. Sometimes as I'm working, my thought process changes a bit and I change my mind on things of where I want this to go. My intuition is telling me to go in a different direction. So I'm going to use my matte medium again for this. I lost the tip of my brush in my water, so I got to get a different brush now. That's what happens sometimes. Whoops, this paint wasn't quite dry. Okay, so that happens sometimes, and this is a great example of not making sure your things are dry completely. So get a piece of get a baby wipe and wipe off what paint got on your stamp. Set that aside, and then grab your heat gun and dry off that area. Sometimes the top layer will be dry, but as you're rubbing, sometimes with your brush, sometimes it picks up the paint that was underneath that wasn't quite dry. Alright, so I've cut this out. Actually, I printed this out from my computer. I go to a site that's copyright-free images. It's called pixabay.com. I'll post a link in the description box below as well as somewhere on the screen. And I'll also post it in the links in the files in the Facebook group. And so I'm going to cut one of these out, and I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to do it off camera. Alright, so before I place my car, I'm going to do one more stamp right about here. And another thing I meant to recommend is get a piece of paper towel, so when you've dipped your brush in water, you want to get off the excess water before you glue it down. That kind of helps a little bit. And now where did that stamp go? Did it get blown away by my, oh, here it is. I was going to say, did it get blown away by my fan? That happens sometimes. Alright, so I think I'm going to put my car right about here. Yeah, right about there, but before I do that, I've decided I'm going to make a little mother mark with my black paint and my roly thingy. Alright, so I'm going to take my car and I'm going to put it right about here, I think. Yeah, right about there. So what we're basically doing is almost like a mixed media collage, because we are using some pieces that we are gluing down. Collage is a form of gluing things down. It's a French word, and it comes from the word coller, which means to glue. And I noticed that there's quite a few people on Facebook that are doing these glue books. Well, what they are doing is really collage books is what they're doing. They're just using the English form of glue instead of using collage. So I'm going to go ahead. Last time I was in California, my son took me to a really good Chinese restaurant in downtown Oakland, California. And so I'm going to glue this ticket down. It was our parking ticket. I'm going to glue it down right about here. And yes, I'm covering some of the background, and that's okay. And I glued it on a little crooked. That's okay too. Alright, so I've got my summer, and I'm going to go ahead and glue this down somewhere. And even if I cover up some of the stamps and things, that's okay. It adds more interest to the page. And if you're using a thicker piece, make sure you get a lot of glue down to make sure that it glues really well, adheres to the page. Probably should have used some tacky glue. That would have helped, or Elmer's glue or some other type of glue. Sometimes the matte medium is a little too thin and it's not a strong enough type of medium to use to glue it down, like it keeps coming up, so I may have to do that. Let's see. I like to use Aleene's tacky glue, and you can find it, and I showed you last time how you can find them fairly cheap. You can even find the smaller bottles at the dollar store. So that was one other thing I forgot to add to my supply list. I apologize for that. And because I use a lot of it, I buy the big bottles. So I have this saying travel the world, but I don't want the world part. I just want summer travel. So I'm going to cut off the world, and I'll set that aside, use it another time. And I'm not liking the ticket kind of standing out like this, so I am going to make a little more marks over the top of this one after I dry this off. So I'm going to take some gesso, and I'm going to come back in with one of my circle tools. Now I'm going to take my Stabilo All pencil, and I'm going to go around some of the stamps and my writing here, create some depth. And some interest to the page. Oh, and this glue wasn't quite dry, and that's okay. I'll come back in afterwards and finish marking that once it's all dry. And you can also come in, you know, and write some words on here to add some more interest to your page, you know, like if you did go somewhere, what did you do? How did it make you feel? What places did you visit? Were they fun? Did you meet a lot of interesting people along the way? Did you make new friends? So I sometimes will write some words in the background, and I will take a ballpoint pen and sometimes write something. And some of the words may not show up on the page too well, but that doesn't matter. It adds some interest to the background. And sometimes on my page, if I want to keep track of what I've done and what the date was, I'll put the date, and it is July, the week of July. No, actually August. This week it's August already, so I'm going to put August 2018. And I'll put my initials in the corner, that kind of thing. And if you want your words to show up more, you could write in Sharpie, but I'm going to leave it the way it is. There was one other thing I didn't outline here. That was this. And to make things pop a little more on the page, sometimes I'll take a Sharpie highlighter and kind of go around a few areas that might be white. And sometimes I don't like to show all, have some white showing. Sometimes I just add some more color in the background, different sections. Kind of makes things pop on the page a little more. And I recommend not shutting your page right away because things might still be a tiny bit damp, and you don't want your pages to stick together. Like this glue's not quite dry yet, so I'm going to leave it opened. And I hope that you enjoyed our second lesson in our art journal page and in our art journal, and that you'll come back next week for the next segment of this series. And I'm glad that you joined me on this adventure. And don't forget to post your works of art in the Facebook group, because I would love to see what you're doing. And before I forget, because I did, I always like to come in and outline my car, outline this object a little bit too, so it stands out a little, which I forgot to do. Looks like I picked up some stuff on my brush too on this page, but that's okay. It makes it more interesting. There you have it. So I hope you enjoyed my take on this week and that you'll come back and pick your own word, pick your words to inspire you to do a spread. And thanks for watching, and I hope that you'll join me next week. Toodles! Have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. Bye!